I'd like to welcome you again to another First Friday event sponsored by the Town of Woodside Arts and Culture Committee, dedicated to bringing interesting presentations like the one you're about to experience this evening. We do it the first Friday of every month, and so please be sure to put it on your calendar and continue to come. Without further ado, we're going to be talking here, giving Robert an opportunity to present his fabulous work. He's an incredible photographer. If you've been in the town hall, Robert was very generous and donated many prints. So if you haven't seen his work outside of this presentation, you'll be able to go in there, and we'll have a book from the Djerassi that Robert photographs will be included. That will be available on sale after the program. I was fortunate in my youth to work with Ansel Adams, who is a very famous photographer, and people often ask Ansel, how come there were no people in his photographs? And Ansel would look down, he would pull on his beard a little bit. He always had this incredible twinkle in his eye, even if he was not happy with you, still had a good twinkle. And he would say, there are always two people in every one of my photographs. Can you guess who those two people are? There's the photographer and the viewer. So this evening, we're going to be lucky to enjoy Robert's wonderful experience and his photographs. So thank you again this evening. Relax and enjoy.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here this evening. What a treat. See so many people. This is always my greatest nightmare, as I look out and I recognize everybody, and I have no idea when or where or how. There was a time in my life where I knew the name, address, phone number, and children's names of every single person that had ever bought a print from me. But now that number is in the four figures, and it's hard to keep track of. So I thank you all for being here. Especially want to thank the Djerassi Resident Artists Program, their board and staff who fund their extraordinary gift of time. Just imagine waking up tomorrow morning and the spirit of life has invaded the privacy of your bedroom. And as you awake, you're informed that you've been given a month of time in a beautiful, bucolic setting where it's safe and secure, with your meals and everything you need provided, and there's no work requirement. What would you do? Where would you even begin to think about a month of time? So that's the essence of the Djerassi Resident Artists Program and what we call the gift of time. The program is much more than a place where art originates. In my small world, it serves as a marker of time over these last 30 years of my life. My first visit was when I was commissioned by the Peninsula Open Space Trust in 1995 to go to the ranch to document the lands to help them secure a conservation easement on the property. Since that time, I've had one formal residency that resulted in my book, 18 Days in June, and enjoyed 9 winter residencies and also led 2 workshops there. Some of the students are here today. It's my intention to paint a picture of the program tonight to provide you with a little sense of what it is, why it's there, and why I think it's worthy of your support. As Zetta Elliott wrote in her book, A Wish After Midnight, I'm not sure what matters more, where the seed comes from or where it takes root and grows. Lucky for me, those 2 places are the same, this town of Woodside. In City Hall next door, 20 of my prints hang, and Tom will have to correct you. I didn't make those donations. Those were given by friends and residents of the town, as well as my late father. And as some of you lived here a little longer might recall that the village pub was once adorned with my black and white landscape work. So who am I? These are my Woodside credentials. King of the Mayday, 1960. 1968, dropping bags in the back seat of a vinyl covered Cadillac at Roberts, and one of my earlier workshops up on the mountain. So to come home again to Woodside here at Independence Hall, where from this stage behind me I used to lead Boy Scout Troop 159 in the mid-1960s, is a real treat. And by the way, this is what I look like now. So it happens to all of us. We humans are storytelling creatures, from the caves of Lascaux to the current digital pond that we all swim in. As I've grown older, I've learned that the stories we tell are not usually faithful to the real world. They're edited by the storyteller, and time works its magic on our memories. And with that caveat, here's my version of the Djerassi Resident Artists Program, a place where art originates. We seem to be much more accomplished storytellers than we are stewards of the time in which we live. So let's begin with the nuts and bolts, the facts around just what the institution is, where it came from, and what it provides. On the left, we have Djerassi Day's End from my book, shot in June of 1996. And on the right, the Tory Stargate, the iconic sculpture for the ranch. In my case, this was sculpted by Bruce Johnson in 1988 as commissioned by Dr. Carl Djerassi. And in this case, I rendered it as a time-lapse image under the wheeling stars under the full moon for the Peninsula Open Space Trust in 1995. The mission of the Djerassi Resident Artists Program is to support and enhance the creativity of artists by providing uninterrupted time for work, reflection, and collegial interaction in a setting of great natural beauty, and to preserve the land on which the program is situated. For the public at large, the concept of the artist residency, and this program in particular, is a bit of a mystery. So my intention tonight is to dispel some of that mystery, but I can't really touch the mystery of the creative act itself, which for me lives in the world beyond language, beyond mechanics. And I wouldn't define it even if I couldn't define it, even if I wanted to. On the left, the whimsical entry post as you cross into the Djerassi lands, and on the right, an iconic call by my friend Frank Foreman, his call to action that greets every visitor when they arrive. First, a brief comment about the structure of the presentation so you can decode what I'm showing you here. For those who may not be familiar with my work, I work in analog photography. My students used to call me Professor Analog. Was not a compliment, by the way. And so I work with film, paper, and chemistry, including my more recent cameraless botanical images as well. So tonight I'm going to break with my own preferences and integrate some digital images as well in color. The best analogy I can offer you, because people often ask why black and white, why not work in color? The distinction is very simple for me. I think of black and white as being analogous to the book, whereas color is analogous to the movie. When you read a book, you have to draw on your history, your memory, your opinions, your attitudes. You have to imbue the book with all of the detail that makes it come alive for you. That's why reading is such a rich experience. Whereas when you see a movie, you're kind of on the receiving end of it. All of the subtleties have been made clear by the actors' dramatic presentations, by the stagecraft, and so on. So I think the easiest way to think about it is just imagine if Mel Brooks had done Young Frankenstein in color. Would not have been the same magical piece of work. So anyway, tonight's about the artist program. So I'm going to use some color images to give you to paint a more complete picture of this remarkable place and the land on which it's situated. I've identified the images that I consider to be my art with captions detailing the title and year in which they were made. The program was co-founded in 1979 by chemist Carl Djerassi, one of the inventors of the birth control pill, and his wife, the author and poet Diane Middlebrook. The residency is extremely competitive and provided at no cost to the artists. Originally a women-only residency program in honor of Djerassi's poet and artist daughter, Pamela Djerassi Bush, who was lost to suicide at the age of 28 in 1978. The program later expanded to welcome all genders. It's unique among residency programs in that there is no work requirement. The residents are given an open-handed gift of time. Beyond Diane's co-founding of the artist program, she also insisted at the time of her death that they would build the Diane Middlebrook Writers Studio in 2011. It's a beautiful building. I had the privilege of spending last January, or a couple weeks last January, in Studio A. Each studio was designed by board member Cass Calder Smith, a celebrated architect, and each studio has a bed, bath, work desk, and a deck overlooking the coast, hills, and ocean, a place for privacy and reflection. The program's located on Bear Gulch Road West, on the west side of Kings Mountain, on Djerassi's 583-acre former cattle ranch. The 12-sided barn that used to house the cattle has been converted into artist studios and is kind of the grand central station of the artist community. The facilities include lodging with chef-prepared weekday dinners, living quarters, and of course that includes the Diane Middlebrook Studios. It's now known as the James McElwee Artist Barn for his family who helped keep it renovated, and the Sue and John Diekman Old Barn, which is here. The Old Barn's a very special place. It was built around in the late 1800s and was at risk of collapse. And the board, as they always do, found a way to raise the funds to have this steel infrastructure built. And it was interesting because us artists who had known the old barn before it was saved, there were holes in the roof. So you got these amazing shafts of light that would come down at different times of the day. And so they put acrylic panels in the holes in the roof so the light could still come in to give that dramatic light. This is video artist Ian Winter's time-lapse image of 12 hours of Civic Center Square in San Francisco. I was fortunate to be on the ranch when he presented that work. Since the program began, it's provided roughly 2,500 residencies to visual artists, composers, choreographers, painters, media artists, writers, and scientists from every state in the Union and over 50 countries worldwide. In addition, the Djerassi Hiking Program offers public access to the property to hike, and also the 5-hour walking, meditation, and sound immersion experience. There'll be information about this at the end of the talk, and there's also brochures and things that please pick them up on your way out. An annual open house event allows visitors to see the facilities, explore the land on sculpture tours, meet the artists, and enjoy intimate performances. This year, Reset Djerassi will expand public services to offer private retreats and host special events. The residency, as I mentioned before, has a dual mission to enhance the creativity of artists and to preserve the land on which the program is situated. It is that second part of the mission, to preserve the land on which the program is situated, that provided my entree in 1995 to the program. some 28 years after my first encounter with Carl's son, Dale Djerassi, at my family's home on Manzanita Way. He was there to visit my sister, the author and journalist Jane Goodall. In 1995, a year after the publication of my first monograph, The Unseen Peninsula, I was commissioned by Audrey Rust of the Peninsula Open Space Trust, known probably by all of us as POST, to photograph the lands of the artist program to support them in their fundraising efforts towards purchasing a conservation easement on the ranch. This helped fulfill the artist program mission and provided funding for the maintenance of the program's land and buildings. On the left is John Roloff's stunning sculpture, Vanishing Ship, one of my all-time favorites. It's a sealed glass case in which there's water at the bottom, so when the sun rises in the morning, the water rises as steam, condenses on the glass as the day fades to a chilly night, collects in the bottom, and it's the water cycle in this beautiful enclosed area on Harrington Creek. On the right is George Rickey's Double L eccentric gyratory, which is an immense mobile, and one of my favorite pieces. I was very sorry when Carl decided to donate it to the city of San Francisco. Fortunately, for all the rest of us that don't get up on the ranch so often, next time you're on Civic Center Square, look at the southeast corner next to the public library, and this sculpture will be moving in the wind. Unfortunately, I haven't found a better way to tell the story of the place than to share my own journey and development that's occurred there over the last 30 years. In 1996, after my work for Post, I received a call from Charles Amerkanian, who was serving at the time along with his wife Carol Law as the program's directors. A Macedonian recipient of a June residency had a crisis in his family and was unable to attend, and Charles knew I lived just down the hill in Montera on the coast. He called me, offered me the residency. Initially, I declined, as I was deep in grief over the recent passing of my wife's mother, my mother Betty, and had just learned of a terminal diagnosis of my younger sister Lisa. And I told him I wouldn't be a useful candidate to really take full advantage of this extraordinary opportunity. Charles suggested that it might just be the time for healing that I needed and reminded me that it was a rare opportunity. You see, this year, they've had 770 applications for just a handful of residencies. Here, Sylvan Steps by David Nash, embedded into the floor of Harrington Creek. We'll see more of Mr. Nash's work later. So, I accepted with gratitude and humility and began to pack up my Hasselblads in my South of Market studio in the city, the same hardware I'd used to shoot the Unseen Peninsula over the previous 10 years. Seeing me do so, my mentor, Fred Lyon, said incredulously, "Wait a minute, let me get this straight. You've been given the gift of time, and you're going to do what you've done before? Are you out of your mind?" And with that, I would put my Hassies back in the case and contacted my friends, the fine artists Kate and Gerd Jordal, who are masters of infrared photography. That is film that reads heat radiation instead of visible light, and asked for their lab notes, which because I'd never explored that medium before. So they sent me their notes, and I packed up what Fred teasingly referred to me as my miniature cameras. He was an 8x10 man. Bought a case of infrared film and set off for Smip Ranch, the home of the artist program, to explore this unseen world. Here, my rendering on infrared of Double L. After a week of testing this unfamiliar film and new chemistry, I was ready to go out in the field, and I had a specific expression in mind. As had often been the case in my life, I arrived as an outsider, not feeling like I really belonged there because of the circumstances that brought me in. And I was also cloaked in my own grief and spent the first week hiding out in the artist barn darkroom where I was testing the film in chemistry and trying to get a handle on how it saw the world. After about a week of that, a couple of the artists corralled me and said, "Hey, you got to join us in yoga." So I joined them in yoga, and about 10 minutes into stretching, early in the morning, I burst into tears and left the choreographer's studio as the grief I'd been suppressing all that time surfaced. Two of my fellow artists chased me down, and eventually I opened up and shared my grief. And as it happens, and it seems to only happen at Djerassi, I'm telling you, the place is magic. These two women, one from Israel, one from New York, they had just lost their mothers as I had. So it turned out that out of 10 people from all over the world, 3 of us had just lost our mothers. And as we grieved together, the very idea of feeling alone vanished and was replaced by a profound sense of community, something I had always longed for in my solitary life as a photographer. After that morning, my world opened up as I allowed the connection and camaraderie that I experienced between the artists and the beauty around me to displace my grief. After all, I recognized the world remains a beautiful place, and I felt alive. I felt so very alive. I came to understand the fullness of aliveness is always available through both joy and sorrow. I did a lot of growing up that month on the ranch, and I began to learn how I could consent to the life I was given exactly as it was. I began rising before the sun to prepare myself for the extraordinary to reveal itself in the landscape. Over time up on Kings Mountain, I became an aperture through which life appreciates itself and developed the understanding that all of life is moving downstream together. As I explored the land, I experienced something new, the turning of the wheel of life, the grace of the marking of time, the understanding that everything has a beginning and an end, the preciousness of life, and the privilege of just being alive. One of my favorite images that expresses those sentiments, a native sword fern caressed by the morning sunlight in the protection of a 100-year-old harvested redwood stump. Many of the old-growth redwoods on the ranch were taken at the end of the 19th century to build the city of San Francisco. The time the Diekman Old Barn was built. Here's my rendering of that. This was before it was renovated. Now, you may notice that these photographs have some strange qualities, just like their creator. As I mentioned, these were all shot on the miniature camera, on the 35, and the infrared film I used was perfect for the task, as it gave me a whole new set of eyes with which to see. As Robert Hass, the former poet laureate of the United States under President Bill Clinton, and a former board member of the program, wrote in the book's introduction, quote, "The brilliances of light and the thick darknesses give the photographs a strangely antique quality, as if they were tintypes, as if time in them were layered, and the images were emerging from the history of photography itself. I knew enough to know that this must have something to do with the film stock, and that the final image was the work of the darkroom, and guessed that the darkroom work must have been, for this artist, one of the places where the work of discovery occurred. He makes time tender." Haas continues, quote, "The black border of the prints is made by the clear film around the edge of the negative. It tells us that none of these images have been cropped, but the black band that frames each one belongs, beyond its technical meaning, to something like the formality of bereavement." End quote. This quality of bereavement was completely invisible to me. I was unconscious of it, even though this was the first and only portfolio I've ever printed with that feature. But in working closely with Bob over several days, as we developed that connection, that in-betweenness, that when it happens, it opens up new perspectives for everyone. His essay is yet another example of revelation through creative collaboration, where the sum is so much greater than the parts. And this is the heart of the magic of the artist program. I don't have the privilege of hanging out with sculptors and painters and spoken word artists and choreographers. And to be able to do so, you recognize the spirit in them that you see in yourself. And it's an incredible experience. It's a world-opening experience. After my residency was complete, with Dale leading the way, the Board of Trustees recognized that this body of work kind of encapsulated the whole story of the artist program: loss, redemption, and fulfillment through creative collaboration. And we joined together to see its publication in the year 2000 as a millennial celebration of the artist program. Dale and I assembled the pro bono team, the publisher, the designer, the editor, Robert Haas, and everyone threw in together to create this book. The board raised the funding for it to be printed in Italy, and now some 25 years later, 100% of the book sales continue to contribute to the program's expenses. So that's the magic of Smith Ranch and the artist program, the power and the beauty of what can happen between connected human beings in a program that itself was founded on grief and tragic loss. It gave me a little bit of my life back that month. In the end, the book was dedicated to Pamela Djerassi, Peggy Curtis, my wife's mother, my mother Betty, and my younger sister Lisa. Their lives, a reminder of the preciousness of it all. Djerassi served as an incubator for books, plays, paintings, music, dance performances that have enriched the lives, the cultural lives of uncounted thousands of people worldwide. In 2016, the board set themselves a lofty goal of cataloging all of the sculptures that have been installed on the property and categorizing them as they must be maintained, might be maintained, those that are going back to the earth, and so on, and did that with in keeping with the program's vision and the intentions of the artist, so it included everyone. To give you some idea, this screenshot is only about half the width of the information, and it's only a quarter of the sculptures on the database. There's over 160 of them. So it's an extraordinary place. And the sculptures are significant because being visual creatures, they're what we remember. And they stand out from the background. So there's not sufficient time to share the depth and breadth of that particular genre on the property over the 46 years that it's been in existence. But I'm going to share just a few because they're fun. And here's Time to Reflect by Marlene Hausiger. And this is cyclone fence with reflective tape woven into it. So when you're going down into the ranch with your headlines on, boom, Time to Reflect. And Nest by Cynthia Harper. This was an intricate piece of work, all with fallen redwood branches, and was stunning when you came upon it in the redwoods. All of these sculptures, you're walking through the woods and it's the woods and suddenly, boom, Time to Reflect, or boom, Nest. This is Nest in January of last year. This is one of the sculptures that is being allowed to decay back into the land that gave rise to it. So some are simple, like those. Others are stunningly complex, like a favorite for many of us who've been there, Estaciones de Luz, Stations of Light. This was built by Mark Reeves in 1988. What's exciting for me about this piece is it requires a very high level of trust, and I think I'm a pretty courageous guy. I don't like going into this thing. You descend down a dark passageway, and there is zero light in there because the the walkway bends. So you have to feel your way with your hands along the walls. And it's a little scary. But as you develop trust, you enter, you move in, you walk around, and eventually you see a faint light coming in that beckons you up these stairs, and you emerge up the stairway through this triangle and this perfectly cultivated meadow, a green meadow of life, through a triangular opening into an echo circle of tranquility and silence. It's a powerful experience. And then there is the work by Alfred Boschi. This 2004 sculpture of a tranquil Benedictine monk symbolizing harmony sits in a simplified house form facing east on a hilltop awaiting a new day. You can see it from all kinds of places on the ranch, and when you see it, you kind of get that feeling of calm. And on the right, indigo ball in the new barn being lit by one of those wonderful shafts of light that come through the acrylic windows. In 2016, for a new residency titled Scientific Delirium Madness, the program partnered with the Leonardo Foundation, inviting creatures, they are creatures, creatives and scientists to work together. They're all creatures. Inviting creatives and scientists to collaborate. These are a few of their installations. Watch on the left. This was a found sign in the rummage of the barn. And it used to say watch for cattle, because this is an old cattle ranch. So the scientist cleaned it up and gave direct instructions for anybody that passes by. Pay attention. Watch. An artist directive. And that was made by Stanford's scientific strategist Tom Skalak in 2018. And chromaticity by engineering professor Curtis Frank in 2014, whose intense colors startle the quiet Redwood Grove hiker. Some more of the sculptures on the land. From left to right, we have Hillary's Bench, named so because our former First Lady frequented this bench when she and the President were guests of Dr. Djerassi while visiting their daughter Chelsea at Stanford. From Wisdom to Folly by Walter May in 2010. It's a little hard to see what it is, but he's got a beautifully constructed support here. And over here, it's a pile of fallen tree branches that it looks like it might fall apart at any moment. And Mygon by Ron Fonda, also commissioned by the family in 1984. That's on the hilltop overlooking the property. Here's a couple more from land artist David Nash that we saw earlier. We have Charred Cube on the left and Charred Sphere, both made by the Brit in 1989. The ranch is the finest classroom I've ever had the privilege of teaching in. I led a few workshops in recent years during the winter months when the programs closed. Together we explored ways of seeing, ways of being, alternate imaging processes, both analog and digital, and worked towards developing collaboration as an opening for the extraordinary to show up for us. Here are a few of the photographs that the attendees made during their weeks of exploration. Have Blue Lady and Tree here, and others. Didn't realize I was up there. Okay. After one such workshop, my creative wife Julie and I had some time to ourselves. It's like being a kid in a candy store. The result was redwood forest floor, this cyanotype sculpture here. Mural. This is the only piece of art that we have ever collaborated on in 41 years of marriage, with the exception of our 2 sons. It's quite the logistical challenge making these outsized cyanotypes. First, the concept. We went with the idea of illustrating the flora that grow under the redwood canopy. So first, the subjects have to be collected. Here we are in the collection mobile, driving around, cutting the plants and loading them into the back. Then we had to figure out how we were going to organize them. So we put them on 2 large pieces of 8 by 10 foot cardboard to kind of get a sense of how we would lay things out. Then have to wait till the sun goes down because cyanotype fabric is exposed by the ultraviolet wavelengths of sunlight. So you can only work with it in total darkness. So challenge number 1 is to take a rumpled piece of fabric and iron it board flat, because when it has wrinkles, it really plays havoc with the image. Plus, you can't use a steam iron because the steam in the iron would develop the blue pigment in it. So you dry iron it, and you dry iron it, and you dry iron it, and you have to do it in the dark, so there's no sunlight. So once you're done, you take the cyanotype fabric, you lay it out on the 10 by 12 foot piece of cardboard, push pin it down, and start putting the plants on it for the exposure. So it's all done under the cover of darkness. And once you're happy with the way it's laid out, we take this huge bolt of theater black fabric, the blackout fabric from the back of the theater that's completely opaque, cover the entire thing, and then drag it out into the barn, which has these wonderful sliding glass doors, and get ready to expose it. Then you go to bed and you say a prayer that it's sunny the following day, because if it's foggy, you've got big problems. So we woke up on this sunny day, and at noon, we got ready, and we each took a corner of the cardboard here, and dragged it out with its black fabric on it, and then pulled the black fabric back, put the timer on, exposed it for 15 minutes, and of course, as fate would have it, as soon as we pulled it back, the winds picked up, and you can see all of this material here is right here, and it all blew off. You can see a little bit of it there, but that's part of the magic of it. The other thing the wind did was it gave it a sense of movement, which, we call these happy accidents. Life is full of them. And so when the exposure is done, then you do the magician trick of pulling the fabric out like you're pulling a tablecloth under a table setting, Pull it out and then run upstairs into the darkroom before it gets fogged by the sunlight and put it in the big darkroom tray and rinse it in running water for half an hour and then clean it and so on. And you end up with this. Here's Julie and the mural. We did 2 of these, and this is the one we wanted to share with you tonight. Making cyanotypes is one of the best ways to inspire children to get involved with photography. I did a class for children up at the Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. It's just a gas. You give them little pieces of cyanotype paper and a little piece of acrylic, and then they go out and find a leaf or a bug or something and put it on there and put the acrylic on top to flatten it, and then watch their faces when they put it under a running water. It's a real delight. And it's 100% safe. There's no way they can hurt themselves with it, which is nice. Returning to the work I've been doing, I've continued to use my winter residencies over the last 15 years to explore the flora of the ranch with my camera, lens, and computer-free technique. Here are just a couple of the pieces that I made in the darkroom in the artist's barn. This woodland forest floor is a little different than redwood forest floor. This provides a different perspective, but some of the same plants. With these cameraless images, I'm approaching film the way a painter might approach a canvas in her studio. She has pigments, palette knives, and brushes, and I have high voltage electricity and hand-painted fiber optically delivered light. Carriage glass lichen, just like human beings, lichens have a tremendous adaptive capacity and are exceptionally strong under tremendous stress, living symbiotically with algae and fungi on the surface of their hosts. I found this hardy specimen growing through a crack in the asphalt outside the composer's studio. And I kind of marveled at it. Like, how does that work? You know, when you see a plant growing out, or up in the mountains where you see plants growing out of cracks in granite, it captures the beauty, balance, and harmony that calls to me from the natural world. I call this green mandala. Purity in light. This is an 80,000 volt light painting on medical film, as they ceased manufacturing the film stock that I require for my color images in 2008. One thing I learned from the paucity of large sheets of color film is that film that's used for scientific purposes, the day that it expires, becomes completely worthless. Because if you're doing scientific research or doing DNA work, you say, yeah, look, here's my data. Oh, by the way, the film was expired. It's a stop. So a $500 box of film turns out to be a $25 box of film over 24 hours. So I've been experimenting with a lot of film that's designed and made for scientific applications. This piece of lichen fell on my shoulder during the most violent winter storm I'd ever experienced at the ranch. It was violent enough that I think 6 of the 10 days I was there, we had no electricity. It was quite the adventure. So this thing fell on my shoulder, and I was kind of irritated at the time, want to do my thing. And I took it and put it on the table. And with no electricity for the enlarger or for my cameraless work or much of anything else, I spent a lot of time looking at it, and eventually I realized, oh, it fell on me. It's saying, here I am, So I made this image, fallen lichen. So I've given you just a taste of this program and a little bit about my time there. I've received so much from this place, and it's been my privilege to give just a little bit back to it. It's been 30 years since I arrived there for post, and 30 years is long enough to witness the passage of time. My memories of the works of Mauro Staccioli, made in 1989, go back to the series of nudes that I shot of my beloved wife Julie in 1996. It was one of those magical days on the ranch. Like everyone else in the room, we were younger then. We were intoxicated by the sunlight, the warmth of the breeze, the beauty of the day, the age of the forest, the power of the artwork, and our love for each other. On that beautiful day, it seemed like we would never get old. But unlike our love for each other, neither the grove nor the artworks nor our bodies are immune from the flux of time. A year ago, January, I visited the grove by myself on my final day of my winter residency to discover that some of the sculptures and many of the age-old oak trees had fallen to a violent November windstorm. Having now visited and photographed this place over a dozen times in these 30 years, It was a painful, emotional moment for me and brought back the memory of grief that I carried with me in 1996. But it was tempered by the understanding and appreciation that nothing in this life is certain except our own impermanence. Happily, several pieces in the Grove still stand. The policy of the Artist Program is to allow for all that the passage of time inevitably brings with it, and to support the creation of new works to keep the wheel of creativity turning. I visited the Grove just 2 weeks ago with Martin and the community on the program's walk and talk tour to discover that this piece here in the center, which was standing in 2024, has now fallen to the ground. The great news that I learned during our meeting last Sunday is that the Staccioli Foundation, Mauro Staccioli, is regarded as a national treasure in his homeland of Italy. He passed away several years ago. But I learned that the Staccioli Foundation will be visiting from Italy this summer to see what would be required to restore the Grove to its original beauty. Indeed, some of these structures, with their time-earned patina of moss and lichen, are more beautiful than ever, like this one. My passion for my art remains undiminished, and when I see these works under the changing skies and the passage of time, I'm reminded of what my dear friend and greatest mentor, Fred Lyon, said to me so many times when he'd find me in the darkroom obsessing, unhealthily obsessing about some aspect of a print. He'd put his arm around me and he'd say, "Rob, they're just photographs." And indeed they are. They're just photographs. And perhaps these are just sculptures. But like most creative people, it's my hope, my dream, my intention that our work lives on beyond us as a memento of the love and appreciation that I have for living and being alive during this period of time that I've been given. Science tells us that the top 4 atoms that comprise the human body are hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. And with the exception of helium gas, those same atoms in that same order are those that populate the observable universe. So while we are in the universe is in us. We are made of stardust. So that's how it is. We're all connected. For every sunset, there's a sunrise happening somewhere else. Eternal dusk, eternal dawn. And in between, there's art to be made, simply for the joy of it, celebrating that connection. Time works its way on all of us, sometimes including a search for relevance, contribution, and service. This is the heart of the Artist Program, a place where art originates. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, when I was invited to come here and speak for the 3rd time, I was very honored. And you know, we've all experienced it, especially if you're applying for a job and you have to tell your story. And you do it over and over, and at some point you're like, God, can I get another story or find another topic? And that's how I felt. And I wanted to support the Artist Program. So this is a place in our town that's a bit of heaven on earth. It's enriched the lives of countless numbers of people, including myself. Think of how many audiences have seen the work of 2,500 artists just like me. I wish the passion of the artists and the energy of the board and staff were sufficient to keep the institution running for the rest of our generation and on to those that follow. But they are not. The program has no endowment. It takes money and engagement and support from the larger community to support the program's unique contribution. So, I invite you to join me in supporting this wonderful venture, this Woodside jewel. And here's a few ways in which you can participate. Their website, djerassi.org. There are handouts in the back. There are books for sale that will support the organization. And last, I just really want to thank you. I've given this talk to Julie several times, and it looked like we were verging on death by PowerPoint. So speaking to her or to myself is nowhere near as fulfilling as speaking it into the in-betweenness that you have so generously provided this evening. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. I want to remind you that next month, one of our local treasures, Margaret McNiven, will be talking about open space projects. So it's a great opportunity to get some great information about that. Thank you again for attending. You know, Robert, photography is fantastic. And if you're not aware, the word photography means painting with light. And we certainly had a great opportunity to appreciate and explore the artistry and the way that Robert paints with light. So thank you, Robert, and thank you all again for attending.